Welcome to the Harvesting Wisdom podcast. Together we explore the vast landscapes of life, delving into the rich soil of experiences, sowing the seeds of curiosity, and harvesting the profound wisdom that each episode unfolds. Welcome to another Harvesting Wisdom podcast. I'm your host, Mike McMahon. Today with me, I have two filmmakers, Kelly Sallaway and Michael Johnson. And we're here to talk primarily about a film that was released back in April, Prairie Prophecy, which features Wes Jackson in Kansas City, or in Kansas. I don't know about Kansas City, but it is a really important film for those who have followed permaculture, like myself. I've read a lot of books and I've read a lot of what Wes has done. I think the purist in the regenerative movements follow very closely to his what he's learned over 50 plus years and what he's done. I'm sure it hasn't been easy for him all along, but let's get right into it. Welcome both Michael and Kelly.
Thank you, Mike. It's good to be back.
Yeah, I've had you on a couple of times, Kelly. So I'll have you start actually real quick with just
Okay.
your background in case somebody did miss the first podcast, and then we'll go into with Mike. Michael.
No problem. Yeah, with Mike, I've been working with Michael, we call him MJ, for years and years. We met maybe 20 years ago, and we always wanted to work together, and we finally got a chance on this project. I met you just earlier this year when we were promoting a film called Beer Saves the World, which is a related movie to Prairie Prophecy. We made them both pretty much at the same time. One's a short film, and then Prairie Prophecy is a feature. My background is in event production and then film production. So I do film and TV, and I do what they call unscripted formats. So anything that's unscripted, so no sitcoms or narrative movies, everything in the documentary world. So I've done docu-series, docs, follow docs, all kinds of documentary. And so that's my background. And I was, like I said, able to come on to this project. It's really something that MJ, he was there at the origins of this years and years ago, he can tell you about. But we've been working on it for a long time, for probably 5 or 6 years, because there's so much planning and there's so much pre-production when you're doing a feature that you spend years really figuring it out. Then you spend some time trying to get it paid for. And once you get into that funding, for us, we were working on just this big idea of agriculture as as a whole story with the environment. So we've always kind of concentrated there. And in the past, like I said, in the past year, we've been able to make 2 movies. And Prairie Prophecy was, we did have a world premiere in Salina, Kansas, which is Wes Jackson's hometown. But then from there, we just had our New York premiere at Climate Week. So we were able to go to the United Nations. It was an official event of Climate Week in September. And now our next showing is going to be in Phoenix, where all of you guys are. And that's going to be a big announcement and a big event.
Great. Michael, why don't you fill us in on your background? How did you get into this storytelling and this the filmmaking? I think you started with some educational technology, if I read your bio right. But why don't you tell us a little about what got you here?
Yeah, I'll start with a dumb joke that I always tell people who ask about my background. I always say that I was a geology major in school initially, all the way till I was a senior before I learned that it was all about rocks. That's a joke. And anyway, it was not the field that I really wanted to go and pursue. It gave me a great foundation for thinking about time differently. Geologic time is a different animal than how we normally kind of look at time. But anyway, all the jobs at the time that I was in school were in oil and mineral exploration and things like that, and I just didn't have that much interest in that kind of thing. So I scrapped a whole bunch of that degree and started over with a TV and film degree, and with an emphasis on education. And then I worked on my master's in educational technology as well, because I was really fascinated by how uh, we could use things like computer aided instruction and whatnot to create really rich, multimedia learning experiences for people. So my company in the past did things like World Book Encyclopedia on CD-ROM. We did a lot of work with a lot of Fortune 100 kinds of companies, creating educational and training things that were often interactive, that help people move the needle, kind of specializing in how do we change behavior. So that kind of stuff is really fascinating to me. But I'm a little bit media agnostic. I've done a bunch of documentary kinds of work for television primarily, but I've done a lot of other kinds of things, developing books, audiobooks, podcasts, um, live presentations, really sophisticated interactive applications over the web and stuff like that. So I've always been kind of motivated by coming across some kind of a problem or challenge, and trying to figure out, well, who has a solution here that is worth pursuing and raising awareness about. So I don't know. For me, back in this project for me started back in 2003 when somebody handed me a book by this guy by the name of Daniel Quinn. I read this book in 2003, and it's where I first learned that humanity's most pressing challenge is that we do not have a sustainable way to continue to grow our food. It's become known kind of as the 10,000-year-old problem, or 10 or 12,000-year-old problem, depending on what lens you're using. But I, I, I knew that, so I learned then about agriculture as being this huge problem. And it's related to climate change. Uh, it helps negatively impact climate change, because of all the fossil fuel uh, inputs that are required, whether it's fertilizers and things like that, or running your equipment over the field all the time. Um, and so I knew at some point way back then that I was going to make a film about this. I didn't really know what kind of shape it was going to take, but I in 2014 assembled a small team of like-minded people to pursue that, and kind of pursuing an answer to the question, how do we learn to live as though there's only one planet to live on, knowing that agriculture was still this kind of foundational problem. And we can talk about that in a little more detail later. How is it a problem, or why is it a problem? Um, and anyway, we started to develop a series that we called Nature's Genius, a 6-part series. Kelly was a part of all of that. Um, and and then somewhere along the way, kind of early on, I met Wes Jackson. I didn't know who he was before I met him. I was kind of surprised by that, because he's really the only one who that I've come across who is working on agriculture at its most foundational level, uh, solving that problem. So if we think about the problem being, we plant annual crops that have to be dug up all the time, exposing the soil to wind and water erosion and things like that, disturbing the microbiome beneath the soil, uh, causes a lot of problems. And then we do that in a monoculture setting, which nature doesn't do. So we have only one crop that we're growing that we have to dig up every year and plant every year. It's very labor intensive. Those kinds of crops don't wind up being very drought tolerant because they don't have very deep roots, etc. So if annual monoculture is the problem, what Wes developed is perennial polyculture. So perennial plants that don't have to be dug up all the time. They can stay in the ground. Their roots sequester carbon, feed the microbiome of the earth, don't expose the soil, help actually build soil. They're super drought tolerant and things like that, because those plants have really extensive root systems, sometimes 10 and 12 feet and longer. And so it's just a big benefit to have perennials versus annuals. And so, and then a polyculture setting, Wes will say that he wanted to develop an agriculture system based on a never plowed native prairie. The idea being that nature doesn't really require anything of us to continue to do what it does year in and year out. It just works. So a prairie is a very complex ecosystem, and you have all the pollinators and all of the you have, birds and other bugs and things like that that eat the bad pests and all kinds of things that make a natural ecosystem kind of more the model to pursue with our agriculture. That means then planting a mixture of crops together so that, some plants can help, the plants help each other, and then the birds and bees and the rest of the flora and fauna also kind of suffer now or survive well, thrive. But, basing your agriculture on a never plowed native prairie is kind of a really out there idea. And it's incredibly ambitious. Just developing biculture, two crops living together is a challenge enough. There's so many variables, but that's what they're doing at the Land Institute, the organization that Wes founded. And they're developing perennial polyculture. They call it natural systems agriculture there. But when I came across Wes, I thought, here's the first guy, and we've seen films like Kiss the Ground and Biggest Little Farm and Common Ground and all these different things. And I was always surprised that the Land Institute really wasn't featured in some of those. So, and I also was surprised that Wes Jackson wasn't a household name. So somewhere along the way, we kind of put the 6-part series on the back burner and chose to pursue a film really centered on Wes and his ideas. He's really some people call him the most important environmentalist most people have never heard of. So our aim is to kind of change that and see if we can affect some kind of positive change at scale.
Yeah, it's interesting because you talked about a lot of different things. My degree years and years ago was in environmental design, environmental science in the architecture department back at University of New York, and I thought I came out here, got my master's, and started a company. Never really thought I'd use any of that information ever again to speak of, right? But it's interesting, as you know, and you have to, I guess, be of a certain age to have that experiences and that knowledge, some of which you kind of forgot, but I guess it's still part of you. And and now, as we've done the nonprofit work over the last 11 years, I've really tapped back into a lot of that, a lot of these different ideas. And one of the books that I'm trying to get out is, and I've written an article with Peter Rilillo, Dr. Rilillo with ASU, called The Seven Pillars. I think he calls it that. I think he retitled it The Seven Pillars of Agricultural Literacy. And so part of it is history, right? And the big thing for me, I think, most recently is understanding this concept of geologic time. And the human portion of geologic time, if you looked at your watch, would be a minute or two. And if you really think about everything we've experienced in the last 150 years, maybe a second or two on the clock comparatively, right? So, and I think, and I don't want to go into depth on the whole climate change and why there's a political reaction to it and that sort of thing. But the reality is, the Earth has different forces that created it. It started off a very hot rock, and oxygen was introduced, and then life on the planet was introduced. This all took place for billions of years, and then humanity started with a few other different species of humans, and we ended up being the last to survive. And the theory behind that is that because we cooperate, even though it does not seem to me like most of us cooperate at all, right? And then we look back and say, well, when did this whole agriculture thing started? And we were, I guess, nomads, hunters, gatherers, and Joe and I were just in Mongolia and Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan, where that life still exists to a degree, and it's not a prairie per se; it's a steppe or a grassland. These are all similar concepts. We all think that we need to plant 1 billion trees to make the planet better, but really grasslands are, arguably more important, right? In what we're doing. But I kind of resonate with the idea that you took a class or classes and a degree on rock, but that kind of gives you that basis and the understanding of geology, but not just that geologic time, and that the from the time I was born till now, population went from 3.4 billion to 8 billion. So that's the accelerator, right? This is the Anthropocene age where we do really have an impact on things out there. And the fact that there's so many more people, we have to feed those people in a sustainable way. One thing, of course, is there's a million different ways to look at it. Reduction of the waste. We have a lot of waste. That's one thing. But Wes Jackson's ideas are what I would call purist ideas. And we'll talk, and I'd love to talk to Wes about this, in the future. Is this a possible scalable approach to feeding this many people? That I guess is a better question for Wes than us, but certainly this is. I don't think we have a one simple solution to all the problems we got ourselves into, right? So let me be. I'm going to take a little bit of a twist here and ask you guys. For those of us not in the movie business. And I understand unscripted because that's pretty much what I do here on the podcast, right? I just go with the flow. Bothers some people, but it's I try to circle back to keep it focused. But tell me about the process of filmmaking, because you told me something and I was like, what? And you told me that it was 4 years in the making. Um, to a degree, Michael, you just said that you started the idea in 2003. So that's 22 years ago. It's funny how these ideas and concepts ramble in our mind, and all of a sudden you stumbled on one of the, I guess the current pillars or geniuses of our time when it comes to regenerative agriculture. I think I've been following them for 50 years, but yeah, and it's also another curious thing is how some people like that are known to people who are in the space, but they're not widely known. I had a consultant come, Tom Herlihy, and I podcasted with him a couple of weeks ago. He's one of the first guys that started vermicomposting, which is creating compost with worms. And he's probably the guy who's most responsible for scaling it, but he didn't write anything. He's not in any documentaries. Nobody, and that's the thing. And he doesn't seem to care, but I think, it's important to get messages like that out. So what you guys did was get out the message of one of the biggest people in our space and an important, really important person. But 4 years, why does it take 4 years? I can film something with my.
I'll tell you, it's more than 4 years.
Yeah, more than
The
4
idea got
years.
pitched to us in late 2018, and we really.
How come you can't just take your cell phone out and do it in an hour or two?
Yeah,
Tell me about it. What is it? What's it take?
Maybe I'll talk about it.
Okay.
So yeah, because my job is being a producer. And so you guys have producers that are the background people of your podcast and your world. And we'd like to, we might be just pulling the strings a little bit. But if somebody asks me, like, what does a producer do? I'm like, well, it's getting all kinds of people, all different kinds of people, all at the same place at the same time. And basically, that's not that easy because
Right.
you might. And when I say lots of people, we are talking people like Wes Jackson, who's very busy and pretty famous, and then and maybe they're just, they're traveling, they're out there, and all kinds of other people that we're really trying to pin down a schedule for them. But in the same time, we also have to schedule ourselves and our crew, and all movies take months and months and months to make, no matter what happens. And every single movie crew is just a whole collection of people who are all contractors. No, we don't have a company where everybody's there, talking to each other, and they're this camera guy and that guy, they're all in the same office. It's not how any movie is made. All movies take a long time to get going, and most of it is scheduling. So one is, getting the money, but you get the idea and you say, yeah, we've got this great idea, but who can work on it? Like I said, I've known, MJ for a long time, and it was like, hey, are you available to produce this? And I might have been busy doing something else, which I've done a couple of projects in the
You
meantime.
were for a little while there. Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe I'm making a TV show, and so we're putting together our executive producing team, and executive producers are the ones that put together the idea, the business plan, and the budgets, and kind of steer the project to fruition. And then producers like me are people that are on the ground producing, field producing. And so you could, and MJ's a director. And so the director is the vision. It's also, the guiding, so that everybody's on the same page, literally. And it could be a script, in a scripted format, but in a documentary, that same page is really, what is the big idea and what are we trying to get at? And so after you're like, okay, what are we trying to get at? So showing and telling, having the experts, getting a hold of them, making sure that they're available and that they are all on the same page of what they want to talk about. This has been pretty, I would say, easy in a way, because there's so many people that have their work or their life influenced by Wes Jackson. And so those people are all in the movie, but also just trying to get, like I said, scheduling. You have a certain cinematographer that you want to get, and then getting that fundraising again. In this, once we got going and we did pivot to this idea about Wes Jackson, we did get our funding right away, because there was people out there in the world that really thought that this was a really important story, and they were willing to fund it. And once it's funded, then you can go ahead and hire these people, and then you start scheduling. But really, it's scheduling, and it takes, again, a couple of years to even go out to the prairie and get that prairie in every season and every place that you want to go. And it's all a matter of getting it all, getting the story. Then after it's done, then you've got another year to edit it.
Yeah, it's like geologic time. It's a little like geologic time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would add that it takes about 5 to 8. It's the average is about 5 to 8 years to make a feature-length documentary.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know that, but it's just a lot of work,
Yeah.
a lot of research,
a
a
lot
lot
of work.
of trial and error.
Well, some of it is just the stuff nobody wants to do, and that's why they find people that are good at it, like Kelly, right? But because I couldn't have the patience to do it, or the ability to do it. But so you get into this thing, and there's so many aspects. Finding funding for a lot of people is the hardest part, right? And sometimes these things get produced, and then the movie is done, and then they're trying to fund it after the fact still, to try to find an audience. So it's a tough chore, but documentaries are particularly important, I think, because they show kind of an unbiased perspective on something that we should all be seeing or knowing, but we just don't get it when it's going through other filters, right? The filters of TV news, which is maybe a 20-second blurb, or whether it's turned into a story and fictionalized. Um, it's really kind of important, especially these environmental films. both of you, you've had a background, but doing a variety of different things. But how important is working on something that has like a really true meaning, which is, talking about the environment. It's not just talking about the environment, it's talking about humans' relationship with the environment, right? And so, how long have you, is that something you've always had on your mind and or you worked, I know Kelly, you've worked on a lot of different things, but what do you tell me about this concept? Do you feel like maybe you got a little higher calling by
Oh,
working on this?
absolutely. Absolutely. I think it is a higher calling because, I mean, and documentaries in general, I think are just so interesting because I think real people are the most interesting. And I don't think you can script half of the things that people do. So if you go and find someone that as dynamic and interesting as Wes, I mean, the first thing that we want to do as filmmakers is to film him and try to capture that is a whole nother story. That's where someone like MJ comes in. We're just because you could just be in a room with someone like this and they're so amazing, like I said, because they're real people and they have real stories. um, you know it's something that you just can't not do it. And it was this with Wes. It was like, sometimes you're looking at a documentary subject, but it is like, oh my gosh, somebody ought to do something. Someone ought to film this. Someone ought to capture this guy. Someone should make a documentary. And and you do look around and you're like, oh, that's us. We have to do it.
Yeah, he's one of those people who's really a game changer, or you'd have to look and say he's one of those people who's, um, kind of
Yeah.
a world presence. And what gets me with somebody like that, and I've podcasted with soil scientists and with seed scientists and with farm, with a lot of different people that they have to, live a little bit of an alternative life, and there's a lot of perseverance that goes along, and I imagine. Well, I can't wait to see the movie with you. And on Thursday we're going to have the showing, the first screening of it, right? But uh, I would imagine there were many, many years where he was really questioning um, everything, right? And there were years where maybe it didn't seem like anybody was paying attention, or that he might not even be successful doing it.
Yeah, yeah, true.
So, so, okay, on Thursday we do the screening of this. You guys just did a couple of, it sounded like a couple of big screenings, one in the hometown in Kansas, and then you also in Salinas, I guess, Kansas,
Salina.
and then you just did the one in New York. So, what was the reception? What was it a fun thing doing the film festival here?
Oh, well, yeah, it's been amazing all the way along the path here. I would say the screening in Kansas was a really big deal because we were going to show it in the presence of Wes, all of his colleagues, all of his supporters and fans and family, and the community at large and things like that. So I'd say the biggest challenge for this film was to translate all of Wes's conceptual and abstract ideas and convert it into a visual storytelling medium. That was really the biggest challenge, and so we worked on that for a very long time, kind of iterating and trying to figure out how do we make this how, how do we turn all this scientific stuff into something that's compelling visually and actually tells a story. That was
Yeah.
pretty hard. So when we finally got to Kansas and we screened it, uh, I felt pretty comfortable about it because we had done a number of test screenings with people, and including quite a number of people in the industry, in and around the industry of growing and processing and distributing food, agriculture and whatnot. So we kind of felt like we had a film that was going to work, but it wasn't until we screened it in a big auditorium, big theater with all these people, who were quite receptive to it, and they felt like, we actually did a decent job at capturing his legacy, which is you know, part of the challenge is to how do you, he was featured, Wes was featured in the Atlantic a while back. The feature article was all about him. The writer who wrote that was a great journalist, really quite poetic. But one of the things that really stuck with me then was that he said that he was. I'm going to paraphrase here, but it's like if Charles Darwin and Will Rogers had a baby, it would be Wes Jackson, because Wes Jackson is, in addition to being this MacArthur genius, uh, geneticist type, he when he talks, he's mixing in quotes from scripture, from Shakespeare, from Dante, from poets. He might break out into song at any given time. He's fun, he's funny, he's energetic, he's charismatic. Um, he's just kind of enigmatic in a way. And you just think, well, how do we, how do we structure this? How do we pursue this in a way that allows us to invite someone into his living room to talk with him? Because that's all it really takes is just a conversation, just sitting and listening to him chat. Actually, he'll he'll spend as much time asking you questions as you might spend asking him questions. But it's captivating. It's absolutely captivating. There's nobody who's ever come across him who thinks, well, that was boring or something like
Uh,
that.
Well, he had those long Kansas winters to read and think, and that's
And that
it's
he
probably
did.
a good thing, right? I mean,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
otherwise you're just physically acting on something all the time, and
Yeah.
he's had plenty of time to really refine some of his ideas, which is was great. But it is a difficult process. We've all seen um, movies about famous people or famous situations which weren't that good, right? I've seen good World War II movies and really bad ones, So he's got the story. The question is can you guys screw that up, or can you portray it in a way that we all enjoy watching? And
Yeah.
so it sounds like that was the case. How about the New York Film Festival and the whole
Oh,
I guess you were involved with the UN or something when you were over there.
yeah,
So
that was,
how did
yeah.
that all go? That's
I'll volunteer one thing about that. It was the thing that was so surprising to me in that screening was how many people came up and communicated that they had an emotional reaction to it, or that they had more than one moment in watching the film that it pulled on their hearts in some way. And while that was on our minds, that we wanted to kind of help people experience the full, depth and breadth of emotion and things like that in it. Uh, it was it was music to our ears, my ears in particular, to hear that people and to see. I mean, people cried. They cried while they were talking to me um, with the Q&A afterwards. But to have it affect people in some kind of profound way that elicited that kind of an emotional response was pretty cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's
And
amazing.
there were some bigwigs who were there in the audience. Maria Rodale, who's the co-chair of the Rodale
Oh,
Institute.
the Nobel Institute, yeah.
Grandfather founded it, and her dad ran it, and she ran it for a while. She was there, and she
Read
liked,
those books, yeah.
yeah.
So
That's amazing.
the did you guys breach the topic or talk at all about kind of this resistance to anything that we're going back to some practices that were 10,000 years old, maybe, or certainly hundreds of years old, that are working. And with today's view on technology, with his experience with plant science and soil science, was there much mention, or did you see any of the people that were involved, including Wes, that were maybe had a little bit of depression. I don't know if that's the right word, but um, as to we got theory, and he's not just theory; he's practice. But then the larger scale or the larger world adopting it or, adapting to it. Was there much talk about that at all?
Well, I would say the thing that we witnessed there was more, the biggest surprise there was that these people who are working on this stuff, and Wes is surrounded by some really noted, other noted scientists. He brought on a guy early, a guy by the name of Stan Cox. He's written a number of books. Uh, one person called him the world's best wheat breeder. That Stan would resist that kind of label, and it may be inaccurate, but Wes surrounds himself with all these really high-powered kind of folks. And what struck me, and these people, they know a lot. Stan, as an example, wrote a book with his son called "How the World Breaks," and there's a lot of really difficult stories in there about where you're learning about how things are kind of falling apart all over the place. And yet Stan has got a smile on his face all the time. All these people do. They have joy in their hearts. They go about their work with joy. Wendell Berry wrote about that kind of phenomenon in the what was it? Mad Farmer, I
Yep.
think.
Uh-huh.
And so it's what's remarkable is that they know more than we do. I mean, I get depressed here and there, and and perhaps they do, but to a person, they all seem to set about going about their daily work with lighter hearts than you'd expect.
Yeah.
They're not all depressed. They're at it, and I think that's a function of people who are called to a higher purpose, people who are working for the greatest good and trying to do the least harm that they possibly can as well. Uh, that that
Right.
that makes people happy.
Well, I think what you're talking about, you can't kill an idea, whether it's a good idea or a bad idea. It's really hard, and if you have opposing forces that are bent on perhaps destruction or getting their way, they just can't do it. And especially if the people who hold that idea are passionate to it, and it's infectious when you see that, like you said, lighthearted or optimistic view in light of all the things they have to deal with. They still have that, and I think it's inspiring for others. And the idea of producing a film like this to help bring it to the public, and as many film festivals as you can get to, because you never know who's going to watch it. Maybe the next Wes Jackson's going to watch it, and so it does become kind of an important work or a higher calling. I think that you have. One question I would have is, how did you decide on what to leave out? It must
Oh,
have been a tough editing process, right?
that was huge. It was super challenging. I want to say this is what it felt like, and we kind of edited along the way. And a little side note on that, we brought on a couple of different editors over time. They were good, fine people who were great editors, and for one reason or another,
Oscar winners.
it wasn't a fit, something like that. And I had an Oscar-winning editor working with us for about 6 months, who just wasn't a fit. He's a guy who is used to producing, directing, editing his own stuff. I don't think he's used to really working on a team, and it just didn't fit with the team, and I had to fire him. So me,
Yeah,
Michael
okay.
Jones, didn't really find anything about me ever in the world online, uh, and here I am, letting an Oscar-winning guy go, and I like to I like to say that story because uh, it's a compliment to the editor that I did wind up working with. He was our assistant editor at some time. His name is Matt Nothelfer, and I had contemplated putting him in the driver's seat of the editing process, but I knew he hadn't edited a feature-length documentary before, and a feature length is a different animal than a shorter form documentary, et cetera. So I just kind of wanted someone to fit that profile. But when this other guy didn't work out, and I put Matt in the driver's seat, everything changed and got better. Not only did I kind of get reinforced how smart I knew Matt already was, but I joke that I had an Oscar-winning editor, but I needed somebody really good, so I got this guy to work on it. Uh,
Yeah.
and I want to say it felt like we talked every day for 6 months before we really got into rolling up our sleeves to edit. That's not true. We didn't just talk for 6 months, but that's how it felt. We just
You had
talked
to
and
find
talked.
alignment, right? And you just
And then we
had
had
to
an
find
alignment. We
alignment.
put stuff on 3x5 cards and 5x7 cards, and we color coded it. We put it all over the wall. We assembled the team. I had 3 producers. I'm also a producer, but 3 other producers, a writer, the editor, one of our art directors, production coordinator. We're all in the same room, going through all of this stuff and rearranging these cards and iterating. And we had 300 hours of footage. We were going to try to get down to 90 minutes or so,
Oh my
and
God. Yeah,
finding out
it's
our first rough
creative
cut.
process.
Our first rough cut was 3 hours long, and the next one was 2 hours long, and
You
it was
just got to cut it
unwatchable.
in half.
It was unwatchable. I
Wow.
mean, but it's part of the process. It's sausage making. It's
Yeah.
ugly, and
I've had people, I've got 4 different books that I may never finish because I've been working on them for 6 years, right? Um, and I gotta say that they're all better than they were. If I had put the book out in any one of them earlier, it would have been absolutely horrible. Maybe when I'm done, it'll still be horrible, but it'll be better than the original horrible. But I've had some people read it, some writers read it, and then, one of the guys told me, "Hey, the hardest thing for a writer is at some point you got to kill the baby,
Yeah.
and that's just like no, but you get caught up in all this information you feel is important, then you have to translate the concept that you're doing it for a purpose for other people to watch, and how do they absorb that information, and how do they do that, and engaging, and oh my God, it just is torture.
It's
Torture
also,
is
yeah,
what I call
it's also
it.
how it's just how it's delivered and what the distribution is, because after MJ just told you that they spent half a year getting this to 90 minutes, we just had to cut it again to a 1 hour show for public television. So when we look at where it's going to go next, it's going to go to these screenings that we're doing right now. Like I said, special event type screenings with a couple hundred people in a big theater. I mean, all those are really, really great. The feedback's great because there's such energy, and there's the Q&A, and people get so much out of it. But eventually, next year, this will go on public television. And when it gets to PBS, it's a 1 hour format. So that was a whole nother process of bringing in yet another editor. And
You got to cut it from 90 to an hour now.
Yep.
Oh
Yeah.
no.
yeah,
But we'll be
it's
seeing
pretty-
the full 90-minute version when we do the screening. So
Yeah, well, I'm glad we get to see that. I'd like the 3 hour version, but well, we get what we have. So at this point, this turns into because these topics that we're going to have in this film festival coming up. A lot of different filmmakers, a lot of different places, hopefully from all over the planet. Some short form, some long form. But what we're really talking about, there's one planet. You mentioned there's only one that we all live on, right? And so you're really looking for a global audience. But Wes Jackson is Midwest America. So that would be my question is okay, you're using these practices in Midwest America. How many of them are usable when you go to the Southeast or the Northeast or the West, or if you go to Africa, or if you go to, we were just in Central Asia. I'm starting to see a parallel between Peter Bick's movies and what Wes does, and now what I see in Mongolia, because you really, really, really see the degradation. They had, I think, 30 years ago or so, they had 20,000 animals. Now they have 80,000. The nomadic lifestyle is dramatically changing, but you're seeing very little input going to the steppe. There's not, the rotational grazing. They're trying to do some of that, but there's similar concepts, but we're talking different biomes in
yeah,
different
but we
parts of the
haven't
planet,
seen
right?
this. Yeah, there's some pretty big successes. You want to talk about rice, MJ?
Yeah, well, I
Yeah.
would say
Yeah,
for
yeah,
one,
we've got
for
a
one
big
thing,
success.
we had a concern that I always wanted this film to travel, meaning go beyond our borders and be valuable elsewhere. So if we think about the long view that around, so Homo sapiens has been around for about 200,000 years. Some people say 190 or 300,000, doesn't really matter, but let's say 200,000
Right, yeah.
years or so. So before then, we were primarily hunter-gatherers and pastoral people, shepherding animals around and stuff, till we moved over to agriculture. Flash forward to the 150 years ago that you're just kind of mentioning now, applying industrial processes to natural processes. So industrial agriculture is really kind of the big uh, ugly gorilla that kind of needs to be slayed.
And
But
it's new on the scene.
it's
It's
new on
really
the scene. So
right.
much stuff has accelerated in the last 150 years. It is a flash in the pan, geologically speaking, and yet so much degradation has been accelerated during that time, in part because of the burning of fossil fuels and and a lot of things. I mean, Wes talks about the 5 carbon pools because we first cut down the forests to smelt the ore to give us the Bronze Age and the Iron Age and all that kind of stuff, and then we wound up with better equipment to go and plow the fields, and we had swords to defend them. So we have uh, the challenge ahead is monstrous to overcome the inertia of all those bad business practices of doing industrial ag. Uh, but the Land Institute, a place that Wes co-founded that does all this breeding work, has tentacles all over the planet. They're on every continent. They're growing their different plants. They've got this intermediate wheatgrass called kernza, which is kind of showing all this promise and is now available to the public in different products, beer and pasta and bread and alcohol and stuff. And so there's promise with that. And then in China, they've worked with the Chinese scientists to develop perennial wheat. Perennial wheat in China now, again, perennial wheat,
Rice.
rice, perennial rice. So we're going to
Rice.
perennial wheat
Yeah.
too, but
Yeah.
perennial rice in
We're gonna have
China
sushi with wheat.
is perennial rice in China is on parity with annual rice. So that means that annual rice, whatever the output of an acre of annual rice, you get the same amount of output from an acre of perennial rice. So
And rice is hard on the environment. Yeah, it's
and
hard.
when
It's,
Yeah, it sounds hard, but
when you have that kind of
perennial.
parity, now you have a compelling argument for switching over to annual rice, which is part of what they're doing down there. And so they're working with research institutions all over the world. They are growing these things like rice and this wheatgrass and wheat and sorghum and
Beans.
sunflower because we need oilseed crops as well. So
Yeah.
sunflower, um, legumes and things like that. So there's a bunch of different perennials that they're working with, and they're trying them out in these different. They're not only breeding them, domestically breeding them, no GMO kinds of stuff, but domestically breeding them so that they can survive and thrive and produce yields that are economically viable. And then experimenting around with mixing them up with growing multiple plants together in the same field to get the polyculture effect. But yeah, they're working all over the
Working
place.
on it.
They're having
It's exciting though.
successes.
Yeah, all of
They're
that
having
is being
successes everywhere.
here. Yeah, this is all happening on the prairie. So I mean, all of this development between the Land Institute and the universities and National Science Foundation, all in the heartland of America. And that's where that is where the progress has been. And when you're talking about, who's heard of Wes, he's been in Salina, Kansas, and there's that place there that maybe because it is removed a little bit, that you have scientists from all over the world trying to solve the problem of how we farm and feed ourselves. And these scientists have sought them out. I mean, they moved to Salina, Kansas, and that's all they work on. But these, like I said, this perennial rice, this is something that's worked between the Land Institute and the University of Minnesota. And all of the perennial rice, the people in China have adopted this, and they're all they're all growing something that was developed at the University of Minnesota.
Yeah. So if we, uh, I, I hate the concept of vilifying an industry, whether it's big ag or even oil, but let's maybe agree that we need to start coming back to center, to a place of soil health and conservation. I wonder, um, I think somebody like Wes has proven what he does can work. That's the number one thing, right? But how do we take this world? 51% or so of the world is fed with industrial agriculture practices. So an entire industry of heavy equipment, of pesticides and herbicides and fertilizers has come about, and I think a fair amount of the farmers are now second or third generation going to land grant colleges that taught those processes. Um, I think for me, that's the big question is how do you start transitioning back? How do you allow, or not allow, but how do some things stay the way they are, whereas, some things change? Or I'd be curious to see what you guys think about it, and you've talked to Wes. Will there be an abrupt change where all of a sudden the world has to start feeding itself a different way? What do you guys see there?
I can say that I would I can't imagine that any of these people would expect that there would be an abrupt change. If there is, it's probably going to be one that's driven more by natural disaster or something like that than anything
Right.
else.
Which is
Uh,
quite possible.
yeah, and I think the silver lining with some of this stuff, especially in this current politically charged environment, is that most people kind of agree. Most people support farmers. There's nothing that's anti-farmer in here. Most people like
Right.
farmers and they support them and they want them to do well. And farmers want to be able to do well and make money at it. And there's some models of some of these new crops that kind of show that that's possible. But they are. It's going to be little by little, I think. There's a long ways to go. I mean, Wes is famous for saying all kinds of different aphorisms that he made up or came up with other people. One is, if you can finish your work in your lifetime, you're not thinking big enough. If you can finish your life's work in your lifetime, you're not thinking big enough. And that's kind of a little bit of a throwdown to maybe other scientists and a bunch of us, because so many of us are, how many of us, so all of us would like affordable food that's nutritious and that didn't cause some harm along the way in getting to our table. So those are things we can kind of all agree on. We can also all agree that we don't want a lot of chemicals and whatnot out there that our tissues have no evolutionary experience with. That's what Wes would say. We're using all these chemicals and we're allowing it to happen that our tissues have no evolutionary experience with, and it causes us all kinds of problems. So people are now, there's a growing awareness of how our food is not maybe helping us, or it's not nutritious, or it could actually be harming us in some cases, especially when it's coming from, glyphosate or something like that. So there's it'll be a slow transition unless there's things that unforeseen forces that accelerate it.
So the short view, we know the short view doesn't work, and very few people propose a long view for anything in business, and it's agribusiness. It's not farming, it's agribusiness. And agribusiness, they're looking at 4 quarters, maybe 6 quarters, because in 6 quarters they can be out of business. And because everything has become so commoditized, farmers know almost to the penny or to the nickel what they can and cannot do. And it's a really hard, it's like a catch-22 for them to make changes, and for them to, it's pretty hard when you have your entire life and your business life is dependent on making wholesale change. That's a hard pill to swallow, but I think and this is kind of the approach with urban farming education with what we do, is we are going preschool to senior level in high school. And we feel like these lessons that we're talking about, um, from just the kids understanding geography or geology a little bit, right? You know, how much is silt? How much is clay? How much is sand? How does that affect what you're doing? And you know, what's the you know, E.O. Wilson? What is the microbiology? How does that factor in the food web that you see that Clive um, Edwards had and Clive Owens had, no, Clive Edwards had with Elaine Ingram and those people. These are all really relevant things, but we're not going to change the minds very easily of a 40, 50, or 60 or 70-year old. Um, and it's not a matter of changing the minds, it's opening them up to um, curiosity and discovery on their own. And that learning process is, but it's not a short pill, it's not a magic pill. But to me, if there is an issue with climate, which I believe there is, I don't think it's a hoax. I don't think it's fixed primarily with short-term technological thinking. I think it's got to be something where we as a people have an understanding, and that understanding is what, you know, can gradually make change. Now, some people are worried because, hey, we're not going to, you know, we're not going to survive. You know, biodiversity is going to go to hell in a handbasket and that kind of thing. But the reality is, you have to start somewhere, and you have to start with something that is going to significantly change the playing field. And it's not short term. Some short term fixes, sure, but it's really bringing, you know, these ideas out. Films like you have, documentary film festivals where people can kind of see all these things that they just didn't know were happening on the planet. I think gives them a sense of, instead of a sense of dread, a sense of optimism and inspiration. At least that's what I hope we people who experience what we have coming up and yeah, are going to share with us. And I think, Kelly, you're a big part of putting this whole thing together. Certainly, Joe and I know very. I like to watch films. You know, give me some popcorn and, you know, I'll watch film. But the technical, you know, all the hard stuff that you do as a producer couldn't be done without, you know, you and a handful of people who really know how to do this. But I think it's super important. Where there's a 500,000 people in the area, in the area that we're doing the film festival, and it's 3 cities. Um, and I think right now, I want to be optimistic. I think that this is going to be one of the top, in year one, it's going to be one of the top environmental film festivals in the world.
Absolutely.
And I really think it's going to happen. And here it is happening. You never know what
You
place
know,
you're
it
in,
could
right?
happen. Yeah, we're excited. No, it's really exciting because there's all types of film festivals. There's thousands of them around, and they're
Right.
pretty, you know, and some are like, you know, people have heard, just the general public. They might have heard of Sundance or maybe
Of
Tribeca
course.
or something,
And they're fun to go to,
yeah,
you
they're
know.
fun to go
Yeah.
to, and they're like, oh yeah, that's what it is. But there's actually just thousands of them in there, and but very few that are just environmental. So there's a handful.
Right.
And so Skyfire, that's coming up in March 27th, 28th, and 29th, and next year, is, you know, is exciting because it's just environmental focus. And so
Right.
that allows us to program films that are about the environment. They could be narrative films. For the most part, we think they'll be documentaries, but we're, you know, we're taking all comers. And
Sure.
and so you have the chance with this, there's a big youth division, high school and college, so that you might get somebody on this path that, you know, took us quite a few years to get on, but they could, you know, they could be 10 years old or in high school,
Right.
you know, and produce, you know, a 2-minute movie that's important to them, and it takes, you know, months to do, and they realize like how much work's in it. And but if
Yeah.
you are going to do a documentary, it's because you're passionate about something. And, you know, to just have it environmental, it really opens it up. It just opens up to so many ideas. And then also all these passions. You could be talking about climate change, but it doesn't have to be that. I mean, it could be about, cleaning up the river, or, or saving animals, or saving the, or any of these sort of causes. But, the environmental is everything. It's it's everywhere that
Sure.
we live.
And,
Yeah.
and agriculture is a big part of it, right? Because
big part.
it's got a potential to help reverse things and to grow healthier and have a better, but it comes down to, and that's one of the reasons I named my soil company Soil, Seed, and Water, because from an environmental standpoint, seed represents biodiversity, which is shrinking. Water, you just talked about it, rivers, oceans, lakes, lots of contaminants, a lot of different issues with warming and just a tremendous, coral reef degradation. I mean, there's a lot. And then soil, of course, as we're losing, billions and billions of tons of our topsoil, the skin of the planet. Those are really important things, and they're all related, right? The environment is the planet, right? It's what Wilson called the biosphere, or so. I'm looking forward to that. So Thursday night we will we'll watch the film, screen it in front of a couple hundred people, panel discussion with I don't know who all's on that.
Well,
I'm
Michael's
assuming you two.
Yes. Yeah, we're us too. I think I'm going to moderate. We've got MJ as the director, because, like I said, it is the director's vision, and he can also answer questions about exactly how the film was made. And that is, part of the fun of having a live panel. How did you get this shot? How did how did this happen? But we also have Yadi Wang, who is a regenerative, as far as we know, the only regenerative farmer, coming in from the Gila Bend area, from his farm at Oatman Farms, and who can really talk about regenerative agriculture. He's young, he's from China, he's growing, crops in the desert. So he's got just this great point of view about, again, how the people like Wes Jackson, who came before him, how did that set him up right now as a young farmer, and, doing as
and that's the fun part of doing a festival.
Fun. Yeah.
I do Sundance quite a bit. I've always had a place up in Park City, and it's hard to get into the movies. First of all, it's really hard, right? It's a challenge because it's there's some of the movies you want to see you just can't get into.
Right.
But what's really cool when you get into these movies is the discussion after the movie. And so you got your film people who really just are film, I don't know, what do you call them, audiophiles or something that they want to know. They want to know the angle of the camera or how you did something or whatever that the average person might. And then there's people who are just interested in the content of what it might be. But that's even more fun than watching the movie at times, right? I mean, that is like, how often do you get to see people who are involved with putting something together that took 6 years and be able to stand up and ask a question? I don't know how you're going to control the questions. Because,
well, it's certainly, it's
people
totally
can ask questions
that
are more testimony than question, right?
Questions. Yes. Well, people come up with some questions. They come up with really some good questions, but again, just maybe it's about farming. They want to know about a certain crop or how, certain things. And and everyone is a little bit different. But yeah, it's not like watching a documentary on your television. Obviously, you have a chance to talk to the filmmaker, and you get a chance to
way better. It's way more
really fun.
Well, I appreciate both of you being here today, Michael Johnson, Kelly Sallaway. Looking forward to Thursday night, and then really looking forward to March 27th through the 29th. Lots and lots of work to do to get to where we want to do, because we want something that's substantial that people can really and not just enjoy but learn from. So I appreciate you both being here today, and look forward to the next meeting in the next few months.
See you.
Well,
Great.
thank you so much for
Thank
including us
you.
on your
Thanks.
podcast. It's an honor to be here. It's nice to meet you. And we so appreciate all the work that you all are doing to launch the Skyfire Environmental Film Festival. It's a big deal that you're doing. It sounds
Yeah.
like it's got great promise, and we're just kind of just feel fortunate to be included.
Yep.
Well, the only way it could possibly work is bringing in the pros, and that's what you guys are. And I think your movie is obviously one of the big pieces of the puzzle on this thing. We've got several other ones too that and I know Sally's going to go through the whole.
Yeah.
There's hundreds of them to pick through to, and
Yeah.
that's what's the fun part about having the shorts is you can pick. You have less people to reject, right?
Yeah, you
Because
get
you can
lots
have
of
a lot
chances.
more.
Oh, you can have a
Right.
lot more. And because at a film festival is one of the only times, again, you're not at home watching TV. So you get to watch a 5-minute movie that could, impact your life. I mean, we say movies,
Yeah, and
move mountains.
one after
Yeah.
another.
Yeah. You can see all these
How fun
and
is that?
yeah, we can.
I was gonna say one other little thing about this thing is that we've watched a lot of environmental films, and we've had difficulty watching a bunch of different environmental films from a couple different perspectives. One is many of them are kind of doom and gloom, and I don't
Oh,
really want to watch those kind
Yeah,
of doom and gloom movies. They're just too much of a downer. The other thing
yeah,
is that a bunch of them uh, have some kind of prescription by the end, like here's the problem, but hey, people are working on it, so don't worry about it, or uh,
yeah,
just do this and that, just compost and our soil is going to be fine, or
yeah.
whatever. And we just didn't want to do any of that. We wanted to make a film that was going to be engaging and entertaining to watch. And then we didn't want to be so kind of narrow-minded as to prescribe a bunch of activities that you can do.
Yeah.
It's really kind of more about developing a mindset that kind of reconnects us with the natural world, which we're a part of, that we kind of
Yeah.
deny. The natural world is something that's out there. And Wes doesn't even use the word environment in a sense, because he's like, that's something that implies it's out there. And we're separate from it. And we're nothing we're part of it. We are nature, and it's all connected. So
It's hard to describe. I agree. When we called it the Environmental Film Festival, I was like, well, is that going to turn people off? But it's an important. What other words do you use? At some point,
Well, I think it's
I
right. You guys are using the right word for, I think, for the film festival for sure. And
yeah,
you mentioned that Wilson's biosphere, and Wes will say ecosphere over biosphere, because biosphere comes with the bio bias, is what he'll say, meaning we pay only attention to living things, because it's the inorganic stuff that actually, if we all come from carbon, we're carbon-based life forms. There's a bunch of inorganic stuff that we're made up of. So let's
sure.
include all of it. So it's more around like ecosystemic thinking, how it's all interconnected and interrelated and
Well, it's a challenge for Kelly. I'm glad I don't have to do all that work, but I think you're probably right. How do we get films? I look at them as the film itself as a tool. Buckminster Fuller said, there's no such thing as teachers, there's only learners. Give someone a tool and they can learn. And so at the end of the film, you don't have to have that easy prescription. Do this and the world is saved. Instead, look at this. What do you think? How would you apply it? But the cool thing is you can, if you're sitting there in the auditorium and you can get up and ask the question, okay, tell me exactly what you think, Wes. Can this work? And that kind of thing is where you can personally be involved. I think at a festival that you just can't get sitting at home watching it on TV. So it's yeah. So you've got a challenge ahead in selecting all these things too. So. But again, appreciate you guys being
Thank you.
here, and we'll see you
thank you.
Thursday.
See you at the
Sounds
movies.
Okay,
good. All right. Thank you. You
take
guys
care.
have a great day.
Okay,
All
bye-bye.
right. Take
You
care.
too.
Bye.
Hey, great job, everyone. We'll get this pushed out
Okay.
as soon as we can. Hopefully Thursday, Friday. So I think it will be good. I'll have Maria reach out to you, Kelly,
Okay.
just so we can add links, and if there's anything else you want us to do as
Sure.
far as promotion of the
Thank you for joining the Harvesting Wisdom podcast. Click subscribe and like for ongoing insightful conversations. Explore our webpage for show notes and additional resources. Visit our guests' webpage for deeper insights. Your engagement is the foundation of our journey, and until next time, keep pursuing wisdom.